So March is SUDC Awareness Month. For a long time I've been wanting to take part and share my story, but I just haven't been there yet. And I know a lot of other parents have done it as a way of raising awareness for SUDC, which is sudden unexplained death in childhood. It's basically an unknown cause of death of hundreds of children between the ages of 12 months to 18 years old. Most often, it occurs in seemingly healthy children that go to sleep and never wake up, and it's the most traumatic and out-of-body experience you feel when these things happen. SUDC is all over the world. Children will be fine one moment and then they'll go to bed and they just won't wake up again. This happened to our family. My son Brayden, who was a year old when he passed away, he had just celebrated his first birthday 2 weeks before he passed away. He was a strong, lively toddler. He turned 1 on the 21st of May, 2013, and passed away on the 7th of June, 2013. So he would have, so he was 1 and just 2 weeks old. We had the most amazing birthday for him, which I'm really, really happy about. I'm glad that, I just feel that was a wonderful thing that we got to share with him. He has a brother who was 4 at the time. He's 11 now. And my rainbow baby, Michaela, who was born a year after he passed away. She's going to be 6 in March. So on the 7th of June, we had a normal day. He was supposed to have his 1-year injections, which I think is the MMR. Can't remember. And I remember that my husband was going to take him because I don't really like doing injections. And he came to collect him at about, I think, 11 o'clock in the morning. And when he went to the doctor's rooms, they wouldn't do the injection because he had a temperature. So my husband brought him home, and we just kind of did what we normally do. My eldest son finished playgroup and went to fetch him, and I noticed that he wasn't himself. But sometimes children are like that. It could be teeth, it could be, you just don't know with young kids. So I kind of just put it down to teething. He had a bit of a temperature, but it wasn't anything to worry about, and that's what I thought. He wasn't really hungry, but then sometimes they like that with teeth anyway. And I know that we just had just a basic normal afternoon where the kids played together. We went outside because we lived in a little clos, and he had this little wooden push-along trailer, and he was walking around with my oldest son, who was on a scooter, and he was walking up and down, and he was quite happy and full of laugh. and we were outside for probably about 20 minutes to half an hour. And thankfully, I videoed all of that, which I'm so happy I did, because I've got that last video of him, which I wouldn't have had if I wasn't such a photo happy video snapping mom. So after we were outside, we came inside, and I tried to see if he wanted some more milk, and he just wasn't interested. So I took him upstairs, put him in his pajamas. Another thing I regret is not bathing him, because I bath my kids every night. But because he wasn't feeling very well, I didn't want to disturb him. So I put him in his pajamas. And when I was changing him on the changing mat, I did notice that his fingernails were a little bit blue. And I just thought to myself, well, it's probably because he's cold. So I wrapped him up nice and warm, and I took him downstairs, and I gave him a bottle, which he was happy to take. He was the type of baby that liked to be on his own. He liked his own company. He didn't want to be held all the time. So when my husband got home from work, he gave him a bit of a cuddle, and we kissed him goodnight. And at about 7 o'clock, I went to go and put him to bed, did the normal routine where we sang songs, read him a story, and gave him a bottle and put him in his bed. We had a sound monitor, which we had in our lounge. We didn't have a angel care mat at that point, because we thought he was 1 year old and he didn't need it anymore, which we were wrong, because you can still use it, till they're quite old. And we went downstairs, and then we got my other son ready for bed, put him to sleep, and my husband and I sat downstairs and watched a movie. And probably about 10, maybe after 10 o'clock, we decided we wanted to go to sleep. And we went upstairs, and I went to the bedroom, my bedroom. My husband went to go check on our older son, and I went into Brayden's room, and as I opened the door, I could smell that he had messed in his nappy, and I thought, oh gosh, do I wake him up, or do I leave him in it? And I didn't want to leave him in it, because that's not who I am, and I didn't want him to feel uncomfortable, so I made that quick decision to change him. The lights were all off, because obviously he was asleep, and I went to his cot, and he looked like he was lying face down, and I thought, well, that's a bit odd. How is he able to breathe like that? And I took my hand, and I kind of just went and felt to see if he was kind of sleeping at an angle, or if his face was down. And I could feel that his face was down, and he felt a little bit cold. And I think that's when I kind of started to panic. And I think I screamed for my husband, and my husband came into the room and turned on the light, and at that point I'd rolled him over, and he was quite blue, and his eyes were a little bit open, and my first thought was, he's alive, because his eyes were a little bit open. And my husband picked him up, and I ran to the room to get my cell phone and dialed emergency services. Oh gosh, which was the most stressful call ever, because all you want them to do is get there, and all they want is your information, and you're trying to give them the information, but you're a little bit stressed out. And it's just horrendous. They want to know everything, and they want to know your number, your name, your address, and all you want to do is say, here's my address, get you now. So while I was on the phone to them, my husband ran outside into our clo, holding him in his arms, and just started screaming for help because we didn't know what to do. We'd only been living in that place for about 2 months, so we didn't know anybody. A lady from the top of the clo was visiting someone and heard my husband screaming, and I think she came to help, and then my next door neighbor came to help as well. And then it was all a blur, really. We had ambulances there, and we had the police arrive, and they took my son. And before that, we tried to do CPR on him, but obviously we didn't know what we were doing. And there was a lot of blood and stuff coming out of his nose. And then I think the police and the ambulance arrived, and they were trying to resuscitate him. And they took him to the hospital, and I went in the ambulance with him. And they had those pads to help start your heart. They gave him 3 injections. Steroid, I think they're like steroid injections to pump into his heart, but none of that helped, none of that worked. And driving in the ambulance with him, they made me sit in a chair with my seatbelt on, and I just started praying. I just started praying the Lord's Prayer, just asking God to please just bring him back, or try and save him. This is when the machines are now going off, and they're shocking his heart, and you just hear the machine say, no pulse, no pulse, pulse. And the whole way up to the hospital, that's all I could hear was no pulse, no pulse. Eventually I got out of my chair, and I just held his hand. And then we got to the hospital, and they wheeled him into A&E, which is accident and emergency. And we were sent to a little room to wait and hear what was going to happen. I think at that point I already knew deep down that, it was the end, and there was no hope of him coming back. But I still held on to a little bit of hope. They probably worked on him for a good 15 minutes, and a nurse came through and just told us that she's very sorry, but there's nothing that they could do. And they escorted us to the room where they had him. And I don't really remember looking at him. I think he was attached to a lot of machines. And they wrapped him up in a towel, and they gave him to me, and I got to hold him. And I couldn't look at him. I think I was really scared to look at him, because I didn't want my last memory of him to be lifeless and blue. We said some prayers, and then we left him there, which I sometimes think to myself, I shouldn't. As a mom, you don't want to just walk away and leave your baby alone in a place where there's loads of strangers. But it's just such a blurry moment, and nothing makes sense. And sometimes you just do what the autopilot in you is telling you to do. as we were leaving to go to the other room again, the police then wanted to talk to us. We had to give a statement. It was really difficult because we'd just been told that our child had passed away, and 2 minutes later we were in a room with officers explaining everything. And then we went home. The whole time this was happening, we had just left our child at home with the neighbor who we hardly knew. He never woke up at all. He was 4.5 and he slept through the whole thing. I only worked out a year after it happened that our house was like a crime scene. We had people in there going through our stuff. They took all his bedding. They took his clothes. They took his bottle. They took the Calpol. They dug in our bins. And obviously I know that they were doing that to make sure that, that there was no foul play, which is important. So there's no problem with that. But I just thank God that my child slept through all of that, because I think it would have been even worse for him, being around all of that going on. We got back home and we just couldn't sleep. I think we were just dreading the morning to have to tell Connor his brother's not going to be here anymore. I think we must have fallen asleep at about 4 o'clock in the morning. We were up again at 7. We showered and we just waited downstairs for our son to come down so we could tell him what had happened. As young as he was, he knew straight away. He could just tell on our faces that something was wrong. And the second hardest thing I think about losing Brayden was having to sit there and tell our 4.5-year-old that his baby brother's just not going to come back. The cry that came out of him is something that I'll always remember. It is the most heartbreaking sound you'll ever hear. It was like he just knew that he was never going to see his brother again, and it was just heartbreaking. We chose to get Brayden cremated because we didn't know if we were going to be staying where we were living as expats, and we didn't really want to bury him because we couldn't take him with us. He's now in a little memory bear that his ashes are in a little bear that we keep in a little display cabinet, and he's in the home with us. And yeah, we as a family, we're very strong. We try and share our story a lot. We try and talk about him all the time. We don't not mention his name because it's important that he stays alive in our family, because he always will. And yeah, it's been the most difficult and shocking thing to ever go through. You cannot explain it. You can't put yourself into someone else's position. It is, you never think it's going to happen to you. You never ever think that this would happen, and it's just life-changing. It changes who you are. I mean, I'm never going to be the same person I ever was, but I have to be positive, and I have to be, thankful for my other babies. My little girl who is going to be 6, and my son who's going to be 11. And, I'm incredibly proud of him. He's come a long way. People don't realize how traumatic it is for a sibling as well. Even though he never witnessed anything, he still went on the journey with us, and it's been hard for him, but he's pulled through. And I just hope that other people can share their story and help someone else, because a couple of years back I listened to another mum's story, and I remember thinking, one day I'd like to share my story because I'd like to help someone else and raise awareness that these things do happen, and just love your children. And yeah, that's all. But thank you for listening, and I hope that, I can save at least one child. And if you are interested in learning more about SUDC, they do have a website. So I think it's www.sudc.org. So have a look, and if you wanted to donate some money, you could. The money goes towards helping find some answers for us, because unfortunately, till this day, we don't have any answers as to how he passed away. His heart stopped, and he just didn't wake up. Thank you.